Cuomo's nipple piercing. Oh, that reminds me.
Jesus.
So
speaking of Mike DeWine,
we just had Diane Ravitch on the other day on this program. We had pre-taped it prior to the lockdown. And she was recounting the death of corporate education reform movement. Largely, it's not totally gone. One of the big drivers of this movement was hundreds of millions of dollars that the Gates Foundation spent on experiments with schools in the Pacific Northwest. Not many. But when I should also say that they also give a tremendous amount of other money to schools on other projects, but specifically like the value add, all the high stake testing. This was largely driven by a billionaire saying, this is where I'm putting my money, and then money following after it. This is a dynamic that you see it in the stock market. People follow Buffett. I'm going to, whatever Buffett's going to do, or somebody's going into this business. When somebody comes in, when an entity comes in and pours money into a certain sector, more money follows it. And which is one of the biggest problems with the giving of money by billionaires in this way, in that they have outsized influence over public policy without knowing crap all about what they're doing. In fact, here is evidence of that. In June of 2018, the Gates Foundation hired the Rand Corp to assess the efficacy of that investment in education over the course of 10 years. The report came out. It was 526 pages long. It was entitled Improving Teacher Effectiveness Final Report. Here it is. Overall, the initiative did not achieve its stated goal for students, particularly low-income minority students. By the end of 2014-2015, student outcomes were not dramatically better than outcomes in similar sites that did not participate in the Intensive Partnership Initiative. That was the name of their program. Furthermore, in sites where these analyses could be conducted, we did not find improvement in the effectiveness of newly hired teachers relative to experienced teachers. We found very few instances of improvement in the effectiveness of teacher force overall. We found no evidence that LIM students, LIM, low income or minority students, had greater access than non-LIM students to effective teaching. And we found no increase in the retention of effective teachers, although we did find declines in the retention of ineffective teachers in most sites. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Why didn't it work? Unfortunately, the evaluation cannot identify the reasons the IP initiative did not achieve its student outcome goals. It is possible the reforms are working, but we failed to detect their effects because of insufficient time has passed. It's also possible that other schools in the same states we use for comparison purposes adopted similar reforms, limiting our ability to detect effects. However, the findings of no effect are valid. The results might reflect the lack of successful models on which sites could draw in implementing the levers, problems in making, et cetera, et cetera. And they go on to basically say, we should have listened to educators. That was the result of the assessment that the Gates Foundation did about their own education project. You know who apparently did not read that report? Bill Gates did not read that report, or I can definitely say with assuredness, Andrew Cuomo did not read that report.
If you look at the technology, it looks like all these different students are in one classroom. All right. Jesus. Well, let's learn from that, and let's learn from this experience. We did a lot of remote learning. Frankly, we weren't prepared to do it. We didn't have advanced warning. But we did what we had to do, and the teachers and the education system did a great job. But there's more we can do. We're still working on providing some students with the technology, with the tablets, et cetera. Some teachers needed training and they weren't ready for it. Well, let's take this experience and really learn how we can do differently and better with our education system in terms of technology and virtual education, et cetera. And that's something we're actively working on through this process. So it's not about just reopening schools. When we are reopening schools, let's open a better school and let's open a smarter education system. And I want to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We'll be working with them on this project. Yes. Bill Gates is a visionary in many ways.
All right, and, I don't need to hear any more positive.
Please, enough with
Listen, the card that they had up there, put the card back up because I just want to see it frozen. It was Reimagine Education. The state will work with the Gates Foundation to convene experts and develop a blueprint to reimagine education in the new normal. Look, I think it's perfectly legit. Now you can get rid. Now, I think it's perfectly legitimate to say, let's reimagine technology. But if you're talking about education, you start with the educators and you ask them, based upon your experience, if you have the ability and the necessity to teach from a distance and the ability to have any technology you would want, what would you want it to do? What's the best way for kids to learn in this context? Not the technology is supposed to serve the educators. The educators are not there to serve the technology. And again, we're walking down this same path by letting someone who makes assessment about education in a fundamentally incorrect way, so that it basically derailed education in this country for over a decade. Well over a decade.
2 points to add to that. Rob Larson talked about on this show with me a couple of weeks ago. It's very important that Bill Gates is in the philanthropy game, at least initially, to counteract the disastrous PR that he had in the late 90s because of antitrust and other issues with Microsoft. And that if you look at, the role that philanthropy often plays with these folks is that it serves a great dual purpose because it gives them good PR, but then it also forwards their overall ideological project, which could be as broad as treat public schools like a business and trust billionaires more than educators. And the second point, more concretely, I just talked with Medina Touré, who covers education in New York City for Politico. And, the point being that none of this stuff occurs in a vacuum. So even before we even get to the necessity of basing it off of what educators say they need, if you look at the reality of the class dimensions of, even if you get everybody that needs a laptop, which isn't happening necessarily anyways, the social difference between somebody sitting in a nice, well-furnished apartment who's comfortable and fluent with technology and has quiet versus a one-bedroom where you're sharing it with your parents, maybe some cousins, maybe a sibling, there's different age groups, there's multiple different things going on. You can't focus at all in the same way on the same curriculum. And the point being that that's the part where you have to go back to the fact that Andrew Cuomo is cutting social services. He's cutting the social safety net right now. And the bigger context of education, particularly if you want to push it out into people's homes and out of an actual classroom, it's only going to get more implicated by disparities in health and economics.
Every one of the professional educators that we have had on this program, theorizers for over 10 years, have all agreed with the sentiment that I can tell you what education outcomes are based upon the 5-digit zip code in which those people are coming from.
Right.
And the same challenges that exist for education when people come to schools is the same challenges that exist for education fundamentally when they can't come to schools. And that is, how are they situated at home what kind of nutrition, what kind of experience are they getting at home? These are all social ills that come into education. You can build the greatest platform you want, but as like Michael was saying, if if the situation at home is effed up, it's not going to make a damn difference.
Well, and it's going to be even worse. I mean, what some of her reporting is talking to, because you're taking away the one with all of the inbuilt flaws and inequities, still an actual physical space that represents meals, that represents theoretically a classroom that is open to all and everybody's being attended to. When you kick that all into the home, you're getting rid of even that one layer of social and nutritional protection.
And on top of it, in this context that we're at least living in, I don't know what the future is going to look like in terms of this reimagining education that Cuomo anticipates, but the vast majority of people who are working in these, necessary jobs are low income. And that means that the kids are probably not getting any type of like one-to-one attention at home. And so the idea that you start with Bill Gates is so transparently about Andrew Cuomo looking for a benefactor for his future political aspirations that it is, I want to say shocking, but it's shocking.
It's actually, well,
enraging
and absolutely expected. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, hoofa.
Going to the IM